You have got your disease knowledge covered, you have got your medicines knowledge covered, you know how to select the most similar remedy, but you stop abruptly thinking, how do I administer this similar remedy? How often should I repeat it? In what dose should I give this to the patient? Should this be given as a single medicine? What about the situations where local applications or repetition may seem necessary? Well, take a breather because all your questions will be answered today. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Organon Classroom with Dr. Gazala. Here we are with our finale episode of Hughes Series, episode 8, which will cover lectures 9 and 10 from the book of Richard Hughes, the viewpoint that he had on the Hahnemannian dosage. Okay, today we are going to cover in this finale episodes 4 most important parameters for administering the similar remedy which we have selected. Okay, this becomes an important lecture because selection of remedy is just half the story. The other half and the climax and the most important one is the administration of similar remedy. Let's begin with the lecture for today. Once the similar remedy has been selected, the next important question is, how should we administer that remedy? How should that remedy be given to the patient? Hughes brings our attention to four important percepts of the similar remedy. Okay, these are the four parameters on which we are going to understand and give that remedy. First one being singly. Okay, how do we administer the similar remedy? Point number one, singly. Okay, now this word, I know it sounds a little off, but that's how it is written up in the book as well. So that only means that it is single, the rule of monopharmacy. Okay, one of the cardinal principles of homeopathy that we always follow is the use of single simple remedy. Okay, second, rarely the dose should be repeated only when necessary, allowing the previous dose to exhaust its action before repetition. Okay, now we are seeing these 4 points now just as the pointers first, and in our consecutive slides, we are going to cover 1 point at a time. All right, third one comes in as constitutionally. The treatment is directed towards the patient from within, considering the individual and the vital force rather than merely the disease label. Okay, so constitutional diagnosis of the patient will be covered along with the clinical diagnosis. And fourth is minutely, the principle of the infinitesimal dose, emphasizing the use of the minimum dose capable of producing the desired response. These four words, singly, rarely, constitutionally, and minutely, beautifully summarizes the principle governing the administration of similar remedy. Let's understand each of these principles and see how Hughes brings them together in practice. Let's begin with our first pointer, our first percept, the principle of monopharmacy, administering the remedy singly. Okay, for Hahnemann, the idea was quite clear, one medicine at a time. In his own words, he had stated that for many years he had never prescribed anything but a single medicine at once. This reflects a fundamental principle of classical homeopathic prescribing. When one medicine is selected as the similar remedy, we should be able to observe its action clearly. Sounds more like fiction in today's time, right? This becomes all the more interesting when we look at the opposite approach, which is polypharmacy. Historically, prescriptions could contain an enormous mixture of substances. This slide gives an example. Okay, one such example is that of Theriaca, which contained dozens of ingredients and other highly complex combinations. They were one massive formula, 65 ingredients mixed together. Okay, that's huge now. But when multiple medicines are administered together, how do we know which medicine produced which effect, right? अपनी तो drug proving happens only by single remedy, no? When we are proving our drugs, we don't mix our remedies and give it to the person and then keep on noting the symptoms that come in that healthy person. राइट. वी गिव वन मेडिसिन एट अ टाइम. तो हमारी जब प्रूविंग ही वन मेडिसिन की हुई है, तो हम मल्टीपल मेडिसिन कैसे प्रिस्क्राइब कर सकते हैं, इज द ओनली एंड द बेसिक क्वेश्चन. ओके. एंड दैट इज द सेंट्रल प्रॉब्लम विद पॉलीफार्मेसी, राइट. कि इतनी सारी मेडिसिन दे दो तो कुछ ना कुछ तो डेफिनेटली इज गोइंग टू एक्ट, बट विद दैट एक्ट देर इज ऑल्सो अ साइड इफेक्ट, राइट. देर इज एन इफेक्ट एंड देर इज अ साइड इफेक्ट. वो साइड इफेक्ट कवर करने के लिए यू गिव अ थर्ड मेडिसिन. वो थर्ड मेडिसिन का साइड इफेक्ट करने के लिए यू गिव द फोर्थ वन. ठीक है. बाय दैट टाइम द फर्स्ट मेडिसिन का एक्शन इज ऑलरेडी एग्जॉस्टेड. So you really don't know what's working out with the patient and the disease and the medicine, right? So monopharmacy therefore is not simply about using fewer medicines. It's about maintaining clarity in prescribing, observing the action of the similar remedy, and understanding the response of that individual patient. So the contrast is simple over here, guys. One remedy, one clear therapeutic action, rather than a mixture of all the individual action, which becomes difficult to determine, right? There is also an interesting debate, as we can see, surrounding the first percept, the first pointer, which is singly. Okay, the alternation debate. Hahnemann strongly discouraged the habitual alternation of remedies, especially the practice of switching between two medicines without allowing the action of the first remedy to be properly observed. ठीक है. अब ये बंदे ने, he is not given medicine to patient for years together. After giving one similar single remedy that he thought was, the most similar in that case, just because action of that medicine is still not exhausted. ठीक है. So he has never underestimated the power of that infinitesimal dose. ठीक है. जो डायनामिक एक्शन जो हम चिल्लाते फिरते हैं, द पोटेंटाइजेशन करते हैं, सो द क्यूरेटिव पावर ऑफ द ड्रग इज स्ट्रॉन्गर एंड ऑल ऑफ इट टुगेदर. सो दैट स्ट्रेंथ यू हैव टू बिलीव इन दैट. ये सिर्फ थ्योरी वाइज नहीं होता है, यू सी दैट इन प्रैक्टिस, राइट. तो हैनेमन जो is giving one single remedy, he has strongly discouraged, strongly he has opposed the habitual or the frequent alternation of remedies. Okay. The reasoning over here is simple. If the disease is an expression of a disturbance of the vital force, then our prescribing should be clear enough to understand how that vital force responds to the remedy, right? However, Hughes also acknowledges over here that there have been exception to this general rule. Okay. And what are those exceptions? For example, we see Bonninghausen's five powder system where remedies were used in sequence. In certain cases of cholera, cuprum and veratrum were alternated at different stages, and in some complex cases, such as combinations involving syphilis and sora, different remedies were considered according to the changing clinical picture. Interestingly, several notable disciples also adopted occasional alteration in practice. So the principle is not simply a rigid, never alternate thing, right? The important distinction is between habitual alternation or the frequent alternation and an intentional one, a case based one, where the changing clinical picture actually justifies your changing of the remedy. Okay, so the distinction is crucial to understand Hughes' philosophy over here, and it makes a very strong point. ठीक है. हमारे cases में भी there are a lot of cases where at the actual symptom picture the disease picture is not available, so you prescribe on what you are seeing, on what the patient is giving you at that moment of time. Slowly and steadily, when that excess disease baggage, excess medicinal baggage, if the patient is overdrugged over a period of time comes in, and the real disease picture comes in front of you, तब तक के लिए there are a set of remedies that you keep on prescribing कि वो image clear हो जाए. अब यहाँ पे ये intentional होता है, remember that. ठीक है. It's just not कि okay, today the patient is coming, let me give some good deep acting remedy. Next time the patient is coming, let me give him an acute, then let me give him again a deep acting, then a short acting. It's not that ways. Okay. So we do not have to be frequent alternators for these medicines, or frequent, frequently changing these medicines. We shouldn't be one of the habitual physician doing all this. We should be the physician who would do this intentionally and only if the case needs that. Okay. Our second percept comes into picture, which is rarely, which means the dosage frequency that we are going to talk about. Okay, the principle of dosage frequency. The central idea over here again is simple. Do not repeat a remedy merely because time has passed. Allow the previous dose to act and repeat only when there is a reason to do so. Okay, in the earlier period from 1796 to 1832, Hahnemann emphasized what we can call as the exhaustion rule. Okay, exhaust kar do us medicine ke dose ko. A single dose was not to be repeated until the action of the previous dose has completely ceased. All right, Hughes gives us an interesting clinical example over here by saying that a severe long standing cough, okay, a 6 month severe long standing cough that reportedly responded permanently after just a single dose of Bryonia mother tincture. Right, but as practice evolved, particularly with the later revisions of the Organon, this approach of repetition became a little more flexible in acute or hyperacute conditions, such as cholera. Frequent repetitions were considered when the clinical situation demanded it. Mark my word, demanded it. So the key message of rarely is not simply never repeat, just like single percept. It is to understand when the repetition is justified rather than repeating automatically. The remedy should be given enough time to act. The patient's response should guide the next dose. That is why Ken's remedy reaction, याद है Ken's 12 observation, वो यहाँ पे काम आते हैं. All right. We now come to an important percept, which is the principle of internal administration and the use of topical treatment. So, that is internal versus local. How to administer the remedy constitutionally. If homeopathic treatment is directed towards the patient as a whole, does that mean local applications are never justified? Hughes recognizes certain accepted exceptions, particularly when the condition is primarily local in nature. For example, arnica may be applied locally by bruises for bruises and strains. Rust or heated alcohol has traditionally been used for burns, while tuja may be applied locally to condylomata. The rationale over here is that these applications are directed towards a local physical condition rather than being used as a substitute for the constitutional treatment of the patient. This slide also presents the substitution theory associated with Trozo and Dr. Brown. Here, the idea is that a local application may produce an artificial inflammatory process which competes or replaces the original inflammatory process through what was described as a specific elective affinity. So, the important point over here is that these are considered exceptions to the general internal rule, not a rejection of the constitutional prescribing. The distinction again lies in the understanding when that local treatment is appropriate and why. जो हमने भी exceptions की बात की is given in a very systematic manner in this table, which you can refer for your answer up. We now have our fourth percept, which is minutely the principle of minimum dose. And when we talk about the minimum dose, it is interesting to see how Hahnemann's ideas evolved over time. Okay, again, the timeline. See, in my lectures, one thing which stays, which stays uniform from the start to the end, and which I keep on repeating all the time, is timeline. Very important. We function of timeline. We as homeopaths function on timeline, right? Around 1798 to 1799, there's something called as fractional doses. ठीक है, तो वो क्या था कि Hahnemann began reducing the quantity of medicine after observing that ordinary doses of substances such as arsenic could aggravate healthy individuals. ठीक है, in 1809, actually by 1809, experimentation had moved towards extremely small quantities into 10,000s and millions. Okay, then around 1816, we see the development of the 30th degree, the 30th dilution, which Hahnemann recommended for arsenic and subsequently extended as a standard approach for other homeopathic remedies. Finally, by 1829, the centesimal scale had become more established with the familiar principle of 1 part of the drug to 99 parts of the vehicle at each stage. The method also differed according to the substance. Liquids were mixed with alcohol, while insoluble substances were triturated with lactose or sugar of milk. Sounds like a pharmacy lecture to us, right? So minutely represents more than simply using a small dose. It reflects Hahnemann's continuing evolution towards the smallest quantity considered sufficient enough to produce a lasting therapeutic response. Now, the discussion of the minimum dose brings us to another fascinating issue, which is the pharmacy clash. Okay, the preparation methods, the difference in those. It was actually the Hahnemannian centesimal scale versus the fluxion potencies. Okay, so we'll take one by one of this. On the left side, as we can see, the Hahnemannian centesimal scale. This method, a carefully graduated process of dilution combined with systematic trituration and succussion. The principle is precise. Each step follows a defined 1 to 99 proportion at every single step. ठीक है? Validation हुआ है इसका by Dr. Conrad Wesselhoff and Dr. Buckman's microscopic investigations, which prove that this scale rigorously reduces particles to uniform fineness. Okay, uniformity आ जाती है जहाँ पे, because the medicine has to act in every manner, right? Microscopic investigations by these gentlemen confirmed the rigorous particle reduction in the decimal and the centesimal scale. Okay, भले ही वो कितना भी और उसको हम लोग फाइन करेंगे, so these sequential steps always stood and passed the test of uniformity. अब आती है fluxion potencies, which you can see on the right side. So we have over here the fluxion potencies associated with the continuous flow method of Finke and Swan, where water is continuously displaced through the vessel. Okay, तो यहाँ पे क्रिटिक क्या था इसका, कि मैथमेटिकली इम्पॉसिबल है. A true Hahnemannian millionth potency would require 2000 gallons of alcohol and over a year to make. Okay, tests with eosin dye expose the mathematical errors of the Swan's method. Okay, the controversy was not merely about the final potency, it was actually about how that potency was prepared. इसीलिए जो हमारा एक standard uniform method है of potentization which we follow, भले ही वो succussion हो या trituration हो, it is towards the it is following a set given format. आप उसमें change नहीं कर सकते कि नहीं आज मैं 2 part substance लूंगा the drug substance और मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि सिर्फ 98 parts ऐसे कर लूँ. It's not that ways. Okay, our proportion is 1 to 99 and that's going to remain the same. Okay, supporters of the centesimal method emphasized its standardized sequential preparation, while critics of the fluxion method questioned whether continued displacement could reproduce the exact mathematical dilution claimed for very high potencies. This slide over here also refers to experiments using eosin dye, ठीक है, जो फ्लक्शन पोटेंसी के लिए यूज किया गया था, which were presented as evidence of mathematical inconsistencies in the continuous flow method. So this debate brings us back to a fundamental question, and that is, when we speak about infinitesimal dose, does the method of preparation matter? For Hughes, understanding the pharmacy behind the dose is an essential part of understanding how the remedy is administered, right? We come now to another important slide of this lecture and from our previous slide, which is about the divisibility of matter, the scientific validations for it. Okay, Here we have examples from biology, chemistry, and physics that were historically used to illustrate the effects of extremely small quantities, the infinitesimal dose. In biology, Charles Darwin's observation with Drosera or the sundew plant demonstrated a response to remarkably small quantities of phosphate. Dr. Blackley's work on hay fever pollen was also cited as evidence that highly diluted material could still produce biological effects. In chemistry, we have Carl von Nagel's oligodynamic effect, the observation that extremely small amounts of certain metals, particularly copper, could exert effects on microorganisms. And finally, in physics, the phenomena of radioactivity and the phosphorescence of radium, studied by scientists including Becquerel and the Curies, demonstrated that matter could produce measurable effects from extraordinarily small quantities of material. Now, these examples belong to very different scientific fields and should not automatically be equated with homeopathic potentization. But Hughes here is using them to raise an important conceptual point. The smallness of a quantity dose a smallness of a quantity does not by itself prove that an effect is impossible. Okay, and that takes us deeper into the historical debate surrounding the infinitesimal dose. Okay, तो ह्यूजेस हमें क्या कहना चाह रहा है यहाँ पे कि smallness, just because the quantity okay of that dose is small, तो उसके ऊपर सिर्फ डिपेंड नहीं होगा कि जस्ट बिकॉज वो स्मॉल है तो उसका एक क्यूरेटिव या जो भी इफेक्ट उसका होने वाला है इज नॉट गोइंग टू हैपन. ऑलराइट, दिस इज व्हाट ह्यूजेस टेल्स अस अबाउट इनफाइटिसिमल डोज. अब आता है a star concept, okay, which homeopathy is based on. The essence of homeopathy that you can talk about is the theory of dynamization. All right, imagine taking a crude mass of a substance and repeatedly dividing and working it through processes of trituration and succussion. According to this theory, the theory of dynamization, something more than simple dilution is happening. The Graf Gall and Doppler theory proposed that medicines act not simply according to their mass but through the surface and points of contact. As matter is progressively divided, the available surface area increases dramatically, leading to what they described as a progressively dynamized state. And then comes an even more intriguing concept, the idea of radiant state of matter. The theory suggests that when particles become extremely separated, potential energy may become expressed through phenomena such as light, heat, and electricity. Now, whether we accept these explanations scientifically is a separate question. What is more important is historically is that these theories were attempts to explain why potentization was believed to transform the action of substance rather than merely reducing its quantity. And that is the fascinating idea behind dynamization. अब आता है अपने सारे परसेप्ट जो हमने भी पढ़े, टुगेदर फॉर्मिंग अप दिस Hahnemannian ideal. Okay, singly, because the clearer the prescription, the clearer the action of the remedy. We want to identify and administer the exact similar remedy rather than obscure its action with unnecessary combinations, right? Rarely, because the remedy should be given enough time to act. The patient's response rather than an arbitrary schedule should guide our repetition. Constitutionally, because the aim is not merely to chase an isolated local symptom, but to consider the patient as a whole and the overall state being treated. Lastly, minutely, the principle of the minimum dose, reflecting Hahnemannian search for therapeutic action with the least possible medicinal disturbance. We put these four together, and what we get is our Hahnemannian ideal presented in this lecture. Maximum therapeutic effect with minimum unnecessary intervention. And that is what makes these four percepts so important, that are not four disconnected rules. ये सारे interconnected है. They work together as a single philosophy of precise and perfect remedy administration. So with singly, repeat after me, singly, rarely, constitutionally, and minutely, we complete the framework of similar remedy. So here we are with our exclusive handout available for you guys on our Instagram handle, the Organon Classroom. If you find the content relatable and good enough, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, the Organon Classroom with Dr. Gazala. With this, we have come to the conclusion of our Hughes series. It's been quite an exciting one and a lengthy one, but the deeper the concepts, deeper the understanding, deeper are those discussion. But this is just not the end of our journey. Coming up is going to be something very exciting, the title of which is not going to get disclosed right now because it's going to be something very practical. Okay. And this is going to be kind of a practical break between the philosophies that we are doing. And it's going to be great. I guarantee you that. Make sure you turn on your notifications because you would not want to miss this. All right. Till then, keep learning, keep questioning, okay? Keep exploring the depth of homeopathic philosophy. All right. Study well, have fun. Thank you so much.